What's up YouTube? My name is Chetta and welcome to Saltworthy, the channel where I'm going to talk about things that make me salty and explain why it's important. So one thing that really ticks me off is all these employers nowadays talking about nobody wants to work anymore. I'm a pretty simple guy. I don't need much to make me happy. I could work the same job my whole life and not really receive anything more than the next person. I would require to get by some personal entertainment, maybe some time off to enjoy that personal entertainment, obviously the essentials for my survival, and a PIC, or partner in crime. Now, I will admit, this isn't the life I would prefer, but a sacrifice I'd be willing to make for the good of my community. But the reality of working for a capitalist corporation is that their relationship to us is designed to take as much as possible while giving as little in return. This means they have a direct incentive to pay us like crap. And if you've ever spent time looking for a job in the US, you'd know that it's an absolute nightmare trying to find a decent pay rate. I recently became unemployed and have had the pleasure of searching for work in the US again.
Bruh.
For those unfamiliar with this process, the first thing you'll need is a well-built resume. The process of building a resume is a long and arduous task that involves listing the individual responsibilities of your previous work experience in the most tedious of ways. The goal of this process is actually the opposite of efficiency. In fact, you should attempt to fill as much space as possible with the most mundane tasks listed in the simplest of terms. At the very least, you're likely to get bored of this immensely monotonous task. Not that it's all that hard, but it is a repetitive and pointless exercise in futility. Because after you fill out your resume, you'll turn it into each and every employer, and every one of them will proceed to not even look at it. So, other than signaling to them that you're a nice, compliant little yes man, I guess it serves as a nice reference sheet that can help you more quickly fill out every single job application with all the same information. In all honesty, much of the process seems designed to just break down your personal defense mechanisms, making you more susceptible to being taken advantage of by the increasingly invasive questions and requests that will inevitably be hurled at you in the US workforce. Websites like Indeed can be an absolute godsend for cutting through at least some of the monotony. They can allow you to fill out a good portion of your job applications with a few clicks. But some corporations are bound and determined to make you use their website that hasn't been updated in forever. And even if they have updated it, what's really their incentive to invest in autofill to make your life easy? But where you search for a job does determine what will be available, so it can help to diversify your portfolio, as it were, with some hiring and temp agencies. Oh, and let me tell you, I have some huge gripes with temp agencies just as a concept. But when you take a closer look, it only gets better. Would you believe one of these temp agencies had the motherfucking audacity to ask me how I was going to supplement my loss of insurance in taking a contract position that doesn't offer any? Okay, first of all, all the way off. And second, how are you going to offer me a position with no benefits and ask how I'll manage without proper support? And it's important to pay attention to just how comfortable a lot of these corporations and agencies are getting in violating our privacy like that. But that's not even the real issue that we're talking about here. For anyone who would like to know how to deal with that situation, I simply just told them that I found that to be an incredibly invasive question, and they immediately dropped it. That should ward them off. I can't guarantee you anything, though. To understand the greater issues we face in society, we gotta kind of take a look back and see how we got here. Hopefully it'll help us understand the rationale of those who think nobody wants to work anymore. And in defense of people who say things like that, which we could probably assume are just old or uneducated people for the most part, there was a time when working for corporations in the US was far less exploitative than it is now. I'm gonna put a bunch of figures on the screen around me showing the decline of the American dollar. But to be honest, I can't really be bothered to do too much more than that because so many great creators out there have already done excellent videos about how the American economy has been destroyed. And that's not what we're here to talk about. My focus for this video is more about how dehumanizing, unappealing, and demoralizing it is to get a job in a capitalist dystopia. And to preemptively thwart those who don't think jobs need to appeal to us, why do you think they pay us and provide benefits? Bruh. And this is one thing the boomers can actually be right about. They know how fucked up this country is now, because they got to see a time when it wasn't quite so bad. Now, although boomers do know that this country is a whole-ass mess, almost not a single one of them could provide you with a rational reason of why that is. But you know, we certainly get to hear them complain about it. The one grace I can extend to the boomers is that self-reflection is quite difficult. But that's about as far as I'll go pulling any punches. Boomers were the generation coming of age during the Reagan administration. And with the help of their parents, they selfishly pulled the ladder up behind them. I'm sure I'll also link a video in the description about what a giant piece of crap Reagan was. But if you don't already know, suffice it to say, the man was the devil, and that's why
we're in hell now.
I'm sure most of the boomers voted in the conservative policies that ended up screwing us without really understanding exactly how bad it was going to end up. But they did have other options. This is exactly why I can't extend any more grace to them. Because not making those mistakes would have only taken listening to people who were calling out this shit the whole time. Boomers had a whole movement to join, and instead they legislated it out of existence because of some fucking racism. Which of course not only leaves us to pick up the pieces, but leaves us with the very daunting task of having to start an entire social justice movement before our new surveillance state shuts us down. I've even considered going as far as supporting the idea of punitive justice against boomers for their transgressions against us. And how much should we really care that the prison industrial complex isn't worth a shit? Why don't we let them reap the benefits of their own voting decisions? Now, as cathartic as that sounds, it isn't exactly a pragmatic choice, and probably not a worthwhile solution to make boomers pay for their foolish mistakes. I guess we'll write it off on the lead in the water. Bruh. The government has always lied to protect itself and heavily propagandized its citizens, and it's only getting worse now. The government won't even step in to help its people against the media conglomerate that's masquerading as a news station, despite the fact that they put outright lies on national television. Their full name is Fox News Media. And they had to add the media on the end so they would stop getting sued for spreading misinformation. And now they're really an entertainment company. There are many reasons why people don't trust the government, but it's really funny how the most distrusting people of the government, the ones who think that we need small government, actually buy all the nonsense that they hear on the mainstream news. Why do you put so much faith into that? In fact, the national news has probably done the largest amount of legwork to cover up this nation's misdeeds and do apologetics for genocide and murder. And it gets even harder to sympathize with boomers when they use the time of prosperity in this nation to build their own generational wealth, only for the tiniest of fractions to actually pass anything on to future generations. Sound off in the comments if you had some boomer parents who felt entitled to your body as an instrument of labor. Getting back on track after the boomer rant, I was talking about temp agencies and how they make no sense as a concept. So instead of helping employers find good employees, these temp agencies hire the employees themselves so that they can contract them out to multiple different jobs, possibly, and make money off of them at each one of those locations. So if you didn't catch that, they just do human trafficking. But are we surprised that the nation, whose prison industrial complex serves as a legal slave labor force, has laws on the books that allow for legal human trafficking? Bruh. This is par for the course for the apartheid state, who the World War II era Germans copied our legal structure. Link in description. And even if you do get a full-time job with benefits in the US, insurance under late-stage capitalism is a straight-up fucking scam. I shouldn't need to go in depth on why a for-profit institution collecting large amounts of money with the intent of deciding how much you get to use on your healthcare is a bad idea, but let's just say it's a bit problematic. And the thing you need to keep in mind is that the money you pay them every month is not yours. It's intended for their profits. And anything you use for your health benefits comes directly out of what they count as their profits. The best insurance plan you can manage to get is one that has an out-of-pocket maximum. And then you better pray to the good Lord that you make enough money to be able to reach that maximum so that maybe you can get some free procedures before the end of the year. And probably a good time for us to remember that the US is the largest first world nation that doesn't have universal health care, which is exacerbating our problems by a lot. I'll be addressing the first world BS in another video. We're not going to talk about it now, but just so you know, it is actually meaningless. Though to those of us in the US, it seems like it means something. But I don't know how to differentiate between types of nations in an inoffensive way, and the word developed is a bit of a loaded term, but I digress. So to those who think that nobody wants to work anymore, why do we never talk about why nobody wants to pay anymore? The average quality of life in America sinks lower and lower as corporations are posting record profits year after year. That's without even needing to mention the ludicrous working conditions in some places, which they actually deduct from our raises for. Most warehouses in the US slowly fall into disrepair because the only measure by which we measure success is increased profits, which incentivizes managers to have negligent upkeep practices in their warehouses, because when the big bosses come around to take a look, they can just cover up the biggest messes they leave. And what this all means when put together is that they count it as part of our job to clean the building, but they don't give us enough time to do that job, and then they deduct it out of our raise at the end of the year. And this is regardless of performance. So for instance, I received an evaluation one year in which I got outstanding performance numbers, but I only received 33 cents out of a potential 50-cent raise. And of course, their reasoning was because of the state of the building. So if you actually do the math on that, that means they stole a minimum of $400 from me in a single year.
Bruh.
And that's without even counting the fact that I worked there for 5 years, and for 4 of those years, we were on mandatory overtime. So this is the part where liberals would likely chime in to say that I possess the freedom to change my job at any time, right? So let's shut that shit down real quick. In order to take advantage of my freedom, I have to, first off, give up my health insurance. And the real kicker is the fact that all these corporations lie to you to get you in the door in the first place because they already understand how difficult it is for us at the bottom to change our jobs. Many job postings don't include pay, which could mean that you have to literally get into an interview in order to find that information out, which at the very least would leave you wasting your time with an application and an interview just to find out that the job doesn't pay enough in the first place. Jobs that do post their wages often like to post a wage range, and the wage range is pretty much always bullshit. They want to start you at the bottom of that wage range, almost regardless of your experience. You can argue with them, but you just might not get the job. That also means that in changing a job, you might just have to take a pay cut in order to get a new job, and then put in a couple years at a new place to catch back up. And for those on unemployment, if you turn down any job opportunities, you lose your unemployment benefits, even if that job doesn't pay enough. oh boy, our country is just so nice for providing unemployment for us in the first place.
Bruh.
So, for anyone who's unfamiliar, I'll explain a little bit how unemployment works. It can be helpful, but there are some stipulations. One important thing to factor in is that unemployment is intended for you to get off of unemployment and into a new job as quickly as possible. So that's pretty much just an excuse for them to not give you nearly enough. They pay you about half of what you received at a job, which caps at the state average. And if your job was just barely paying the bills before,
Bruh.
and when you consider that most USians don't even have enough savings for a single emergency, think where that might leave you. This means that you get punished the more you make for going on unemployment. So this means when we seek to increase our means, we're the ones who must take all the risk. In order to receive benefits, you have to continue filling out job applications, and you're not allowed to make money on the side, or you'll have to report it, and they will take it out of the already insufficient unemployment checks they're giving you. And the fun doesn't end there, because you also have to keep a detailed record of all the places you apply, so that if they ever just happen to do an audit on you, you don't have to pay the money that they gave you back to the state.
Bruh.
Which, if you've already spent it on bills, would literally put you in debt to the state, and they have the ability to garnish your wages. So, ooh boy, what a joy unemployment is. So anyone who sees this as freedom must have thought Rose was based as fuck for letting that pervert freeze to death. I mean, he could have just swam to safety, duh. Don't worry about the ice cubes frozen to his face.
Bruh.
Having the freedom to live your life even when you don't have a job without having to worry about losing your home is real freedom. Also, let's not forget that there was a time in this nation where a high school dropout could get a job and support an entire family. This means that it was the other person's job in a monogamous relationship to just keep the house clean until those two idiots decide to have babies. By the way, not passing judgment, babies are just stinky. But seriously, why do we now find it acceptable that two people living in a household both need to have full-time jobs and figure out the household chores in their spare time? Who the heck has time for babies? The way history is supposed to work is our lives are supposed to get more free over time through our associations with other people in society. When that ceases to be the case, time for a new system of exploitation. Well, that's what Marxists seek to put an end to. The system of exploitation, that is. Not the freedom and the living better. You get it. But now that I've covered the cesspool that is employment in the US, it's time to talk about unions. As an advocate for class consciousness, I am staunchly pro-union. But that being said, we need to talk about the problem with American unions. I was a union member when I worked for UPS, and I'm not honestly surprised to hear they're still going through it now. When I worked there, I got a $12 an hour pittance, and that was just 6 years ago. They're now fighting for $25 an hour. I left that job 5 years ago because I was excited to go make $14 an hour at CVS Health. And then over the next 5 years of working there, our pay went up to $20 an hour over time because they kept raising the pay in an effort to keep everyone from wanting to unionize. And when I left there, I was barely making more than brand new people starting out, because they're starting out at $20 an hour and I was only making like $21. And now we can't even get a $15 minimum wage secured when I am making $20 an hour and I'm kind of still struggling, living at the end of my means, with no children. Although I am sure that the union was hard at work those 5 years, driving up pay rates, which is likely why I was receiving pay raises over at my other job, which is an example of why unions are even good for people who aren't a part of them. That's why our pay raises go up over time, is because unionized parts of the industry get pay raises and the rest of the industry is forced to follow suit. But despite what fighting the union has been doing for us. They're basically keeping us just on the edge of the poverty line. Whoop-de-fucking-do. And with that, it's easy to see why people don't have a lot of faith in unions in America. And that's without even addressing the fact that the government keeps sweeping their legs out from under them, like what Biden did with the railroad strike. Awesome job, fucking liberals! Isn't it interesting how every time the government steps in to resolve one of these issues, it just ends up with them telling workers to get back to work or they'll all be fired and homeless? All that really makes clear is the fact that Democrats don't really give a crap about us working class people. Because for those of you who don't know how government works, they could just as easily go the opposite direction with it and legislate that these corporations must give us livable wages. There's a lot of research that goes into the numbers behind the negotiations that unions put forward. They're not just throwing random numbers up there. And they fall well within the company's means. Far too well within. Also, the narrative around unions and union workers needs some course correction. One of the more common sentiments you might hear among a group of American workers when you bring up unions is that unions only protect lazy workers, which is BS propaganda literally engineered from those rich bastards who are stealing our labor. Unions need revitalization, but that can only be done from the inside. So, more than anything, unions need numbers. More workers need to make the active decision to build community with their fellow workers, to push back against the unfair and predatory practices of the workplaces that we work in. If we see other workers being treated unfairly around us, we need to start banding together to help each other out in these situations. Now, don't get me wrong, I do understand that this will get people fired sometimes, but the reason that we do it is for the times that it works. Speak to your coworkers about unions and try to make them think more favorably about unions, and at the very least build strong working communities. I speak from experience when I say there will be trial and error. I tried to speak up against the manager, and I definitely could have handled the situation better, but no one stood up to back me up. This man intentionally started an argument with me because I was about to expose him as a little liar to the whole fucking room. And I guarantee he wouldn't have fired a whole room of people that he needed to go back out there and do some work. But the reason I'm upset about it is because I was ready to take a stand. I didn't make sure that all my coworkers were ready to back that cause. And there's no guarantee it would have worked, but now a good group of workers is broken apart and a potential union is thwarted. And by default, this corporation just gets to keep exploiting people. And this time it'll just be a new group of people. Since we must work to survive, one of the best things we can do to build community is unionize with our fellow workers. When we can't unionize, we can incrementally change people's minds about what unions can do for us. But the most important work we have to do is work on ourselves. Keep our mental health in check and address your biases. I mean, one of the reasons I started making these videos is because I need an outlet to get out what I feel I need to say, even if nobody's really listening. But this will likely become a hobby because I'm going to be forced back into the trenches eventually, and I'll have to just get ready to self-sacrifice again. But that's what it's really like to work in the US. It's not fulfilling or even optional, but compulsory. So if you like this video, if you wouldn't mind liking, commenting, helping me out with the algorithm, and I'd love to see some more subscribers coming in because I'm going to try and keep new videos coming in every couple weeks. So you should expect to see another video up there in 2 more weeks. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to hearing some of your guys' opinions out there.